LZ, I want to talk Shemar Stewart with you. I think you have him 19th in your most recent mock draft, but is an interesting case because I've always thought this is who Shemar Stewart would be, but the production wasn't there at A&M. And there might be other reasons why. When you look at him and see the measurables, the body, the speed, everything about him, and then you look at some of the production, how are NFL GMs evaluating him based on what he did at A&M?
Well, so different people have different thoughts on production. So, for some, they say production is who you are. Like, we want to see the traits, yeah, but we want to see the production. We want to see that you have done something, that we're not just getting a blank slate that we have to build from the ground floor up. And of course, he's not a blank slate, not in the first round. But the production, when you watch it on tape, like, you see the flashes. He doesn't change directions particularly well. So you'll notice when he gets into the pocket, there's a lot of times the quarterback moves and he just runs by. He doesn't break down in space and hound the quarterback as well as he needs to. The question is, can he do a better job, or is he a little bit, is he just a guy who's very linear in the way he rushes? I think the problem with Shemar Stewart is he's not particularly skilled. Like, Nick Scourton is much more skilled as a rusher. He just doesn't have these elite measurables and explosiveness that Shemar Stewart has. So what NFL teams will do is they'll say, Scourton's a nice pick. He's got a lower ceiling but higher floor. He's more like a late first to mid-second round pick. With Shemar Stewart, some teams will say, you know what, we didn't see it on tape. We know he's got the traits. We'll draft him late in the draft. Another team's going to say, you know what, we think we got a great coach. We see flashes. We liked what we saw to him at his pro day workout. We liked when we had him in our top 30 visit, if they did. And we think he's just waiting to be unlocked, and he's going to be like Odafe Owe, who was, out of Penn State, and it took him a couple of years, but he's become a good rush guy. Like, there are examples of guys who are not particularly productive in college who became very productive. Same thing can be true on the other side, though. Guys who get drafted based on traits who weren't productive in college, and they're not productive in the pros. So it's really a matter of what you think of your defensive line coach, and then what you think of a player's capacity to learn and get better. Because he has the ability to do everything you want. Like, he is uniquely gifted from an athletic standpoint. But rush instincts, things like that, sometimes those are hard to develop.
LZ, is interesting because probably a year ago I would have told you it was Nick Scourton going to go in the top 20 of this draft. He's probably going to be a second rounder. What happened with Nick? How much of it was the production that the entire defensive line really did not put out for Texas A&M?
I think Nick, I'm actually a bigger fan of Nick's than I think the NFL draft is going to be. I think he will go on sometime in early second. But I think teams still like him. They just don't like him as a first necessarily. But it only takes one team. I think a team to keep an eye on is the Ravens, for example, because he fits the Ravens mold. I watched him, so when I study tape, I'm watching all these reps. And I noticed they sent a lot more. He had to deal with running backs being shipped over to him, with lines being slid his direction, with tight ends being lined up on his side to widen them out, make it a little bit tougher to get off. And I think Nick was maybe a little too finesse in his approach. When you watch him at Purdue, he used power to just cave. It was a combination of moves, but also power. And I think teams kind of took away some of his momentum with the way that they handled him with chips and everything I just talked about. But when you watch him, he's really skilled. He knows what he's doing. He's an instinctive player. He's a good football player. And I think what teams looked at was his production was pretty average relative to what was expected. Then you look at, was he explosive off the snap? Well, he's not going to beat you around the corner really easily. Okay, well, how is he going to rush then? And you start asking these questions, and it's one thing when you're a junior and you produce, or you're a second-year player, depending on if you come out early or not. And then once it's time to actually draft a player, now you got to look at, well, how's he going to win? And how's he going to rush? And how does he hold up? How long are his arms? We need to know, is he a long-arm guy who can get off of blocks and shed people? Because if you're shorter armed, it's harder to shed players. Does he have that upper body power to shed and get rid? Can he range quickly if he gets, if teams want to run wide on him, can he get wide quickly and close the distance so a running back can't turn the corner? You start asking more questions when it comes draft time. And I think for some people that it's raised maybe some concerns with Nick Scourton, just enough to knock him out of that first-round range. But for me, I'm not really worried about it. I think he's a good football player. I saw the Purdue version. I saw the A&M version. He's smart. He's instinctive. He's strong and powerful. I think he's a good player, and I think somebody's going to get a discounted starter in their second round.
Can Shemar Turner fall in that same category, a discounted starter at some point? I feel like another guy that the numbers weren't fantastic. He was playing with injury, but you look at him, he looks like another Greek god.
Yeah, I like Shemar Turner a lot, and I think there's some teams a lot. I think he'll go in the second. I thought it was maybe second, third. You know, he's coming off the injury, but he got medically cleared. Shemar Turner, to me, when you watch him play, man, he plays hard. He's explosive. You know, the issue that pops out with him is he's just got to keep his cool. There's so many dumb penalties, so many dumb 15-yard penalties that just it didn't need to happen. But, you know, usually I kind of checked in on those, and they were usually when he was kind of standing up for a teammate or something, but it doesn't matter. You can't have those penalties after the rep's over. He's got to eliminate the 15-yard penalties. But I think it gets to the point that he plays with some edge. He plays with toughness. He plays with attitude. And you'd much rather have a guy that you have to reel in, as they say, to say whoa rather than go. You don't want to have a guy that's, you know, you got to get motivated. You got to get him to crank it up. You'd much rather try to dial it back on a player who maybe is a little extra. And that's what Shemar Turner is. He's a little extra, but he's got great body type, as you mentioned. I think he can play in a 3-4 or a 4-3 front, odd or even fronts. I think he's going to be a good rusher in the pros. I think the pro game is really made for him. And for me, I love the toughness, the attitude, the explosiveness. So he'll go in a second. I guarantee you there's teams that love him. And I think second round will be the pick there. And I think he's very quietly going to turn into, he may have a chance to be the best defensive lineman of the three who get drafted by the Aggies this year.
Talk to me about Shedeur Sanders, because I'm all over the place when it comes to him. And Dion, too, for the record. I kind of link them together when I evaluate, and that's probably not fair to Shedeur. I think you have him late to the Browns. What are some of the question marks you have, and maybe some of the reasons why he could thrive at the next level?
Well, I have him. Well, first of all, on tape, he's probably more of a second-round pick, late second. And that's not a slide. I think he's the second best quarterback in this draft. I don't think it's a great quarterback draft. I think there will be some average starters and mostly good backups, you know, who could do some low end starting stuff. The guys who will play in the league a while. The concern is, so you don't have to have a big arm, but he has a very average arm. Then when you go from the average arm and you look at being able to work off platform on the move, I think that's maybe slightly below average. He's very accurate. He's very poised. He has a lot of confidence. He's got to get his internal clock working better. The concern I have is he wants to play hero ball, and he's not built for hero ball, right? He's not, you know. And I think having prime time as a dad, he's got this ego and he's got this flair, but he's not built for flair. He's built, really, his game is built for being a game manager. And if he plays to his strengths of what he does, he's not this explosive athlete. So if he plays to what his strengths are, I think he could end up being a pretty good starting quarterback in the league. But if he tries to play hero ball and hold the ball a long time and try to make plays that doesn't, where he's not staying on time and maintaining his internal clock, I think he's headed for a potential disaster. But that's why I think the ceiling is a little higher and the floor is lower, because I don't know. He's never been coached by anybody but his dad. Is he coachable? Do we know? Is his dad? And I think you're right for factoring in Dion. I don't know how you couldn't. He's everywhere he goes. As soon as it goes bad, Dion's going to be tweeting or talking about it on a show. You just know it. It's going to cause issues in the locker room. Wherever, if there's a head coach fired, immediately there's going to be discussion on ESPN 24 hours a day, 7 days a week about, is Dion going to the Browns? Is Dion going to the Giants? Is he the new head coach coming there? And is Shedeur going to have a podcast right off the bat as a as a rookie quarterback when you really need to be focused on being the best quarterback you can be? I think these are legitimate questions to ask, and you don't usually have to ask that about quarterbacks. I think you have to ask that. But when you get past all that and you just analyze a football player, I actually think he's a pretty good football player. I just think he needs to stay within himself and play to his strengths and not try to do something that he's not really physically capable of doing on the next level like some of the elite quarterbacks are.
LZ, last thing for you. This whole Nico situation, how does that potentially affect his NFL career or where he gets drafted in a year or two whenever he enters the draft? And I wonder what SEC guy thinks about it.
SEC guy would not be a fan. So right off the bat, teams immediately are saying, okay, his dad's a pain in the ass. I mean, right off the bat, the background, and they would find that out eventually when they talk with teams that he has a helicopter dad that's extremely influential and maybe beyond where he should be. The questions, are you like, is ball the most important thing, or is just focusing on your contract the most important thing? And that's going to be, and I'm talking to a personnel director, he said what's really interesting is what NIL has done is given us a better look at who guys are. They always had to ask this question: what will a player do with more money, more time, and more access on the next level? You can't really, you couldn't really answer those questions until they were hit with that NFL money. You weren't sure what you were going to get. How are guys going to respond? Are they mature enough? Do they love ball enough to where it's not going to matter? Now you're getting that answered a lot quicker, and you're finding out which of these players, and you can talk to teams, and the teams will tell you he came in and tried to get more money nonstop. It was about he didn't want to go do any of the NIL stuff. He just wanted a paycheck. And so I talked to some scouts who said they're finding out the background and the histories and the personalities of players now, because NIL is unearthing who is affected by it and who is unaffected by it. And it's actually making it maybe a little bit easier. It makes it harder to find the right players, but it makes it easier to know who the right players are.
LZ, I appreciate it, man. Hope to talk to you soon.
You got it. Thanks, Dave.